Hi guys, and you're all very welcome along to our last in our series of webinars. Today we're speaking about taking action, and specifically we're going to look at the idea of goal setting and how we can best formulate our goals. What are some of the barriers that maybe get in the way of the goal setting process? So if we start here and we look at an overall roadmap, it's important to consider your outcome, your performance, and your process. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of these areas. But just to give you a bit of an overview, the outcome is the aspirational aspect of our goals. It considers your personal growth, your relationships, your health, your career, and your hobbies. Your performance goals are the little landmarks or milestones that we may meet along the way. And it's important to be flexible with these. And then the process, well, that's the strategy that we put in place in order to achieve the performance and ultimately the outcome goals. When we think about why setting goals is important, there's an interesting study that was done by Dan Gilbert. And effectively, what he looked at was he looked at where our thoughts tend to go throughout the day. And believe it or not, we spend roughly 50% of our time thinking about what's not going to happen as we do thinking about what is happening. So our mind does have a tendency to wander, whereas having clear goals helps give us direction. But it's important that we get those goals down on paper. Now, when it comes to setting goals, we want to again consider the different dimensions of our wellness. As we've spoken about time and time again on this program, the reason it's important is that if we become one-dimensional in our goals, we'll tend to find that the other areas will obviously get neglected, but ultimately they will impact that specific area. If we were to use a brief example, if I put tons of time and energy into my physical wellness, and I had a perfect exercise routine, I was quite good with my nutrition, and my sleep was where I wanted it to be. And I put all my focus and energy in that area. Now, what I might tend to find is that I no longer maybe have time to spend with friends and family or as much time. So it impacts my social wellness. I may find that there's something I'm not addressing in the emotional wellness aspect, like, for example, negative self-talk. Maybe I'm getting my 5 exercise sessions in a week, but I'm negative in my self-talk because I haven't been able to bring my run time down to under 20 minutes for a 5K. So it's important that we consider, yes, we might be succeeding in one area, which is fantastic, but let's not forget about those other areas of wellness, especially when it comes to those outcome goals. If I have a goal around my physical wellness, well, how might it impact or positively benefit my emotional wellness, my social wellness? If I'm taking up running, well, then we know cognitively I will become sharper. I'll be able to deal with some of the stressors in my day-to-day far better. But also, can I bring in the social aspect in terms of that? Could I join a running club? So it's just about trying to actually consider, when we set these goals, are they impacting one or are they impacting many of the different dimensions of our wellness? Now, when it comes to setting goals, there are a couple of self-defeating traps that we fall into. And I've named a couple here. The first one, obviously, the perfectionist trap. This is where we set standards that are far too high. They're unattainable, and they're the standards that we hold ourselves against. Now, long term, this is going to demotivate us because we'll just never feel that we're good enough. So it's important to set realistic targets for yourself, and don't compare yourself necessarily to others. Try and compare yourself to where you were the previous week, or try and compare yourself to somebody who's maybe in a very similar position to you. Like, if I'm starting to run for the first time, Mo Farah is not the person I want to mark my progress against. Whereas a colleague who began running at a similar time, that might be a better person to actually mark my progress against. What about imposter syndrome? What about that trap when it comes to setting goals? Well, this can sometimes actually work in the other direction. So we actually have got the capabilities, we have got the capacity, but we shy away from taking the responsibility because we have a negative internal dialogue which tells us that we're not good enough. We can't actually reach this challenge that's in front of us. And it's important to make sure that we rely on facts and not fiction here. If you feel you're not good enough, what facts is that statement based on? And can you begin to reframe that situation? The next trap, the over engagement trap. This speaks back to making sure you're not too one dimensional in your approach. And we gave a good example of that around physical wellness. It's important to balance those different dimensions of wellness. As we've spoken about before, we want you to view them like you would view different parts of your body. So your heart, your lungs, your muscles, etc. If one isn't functioning the way it should, it will eventually impact the whole system. So remember that we're not effectively, we're a continuum. We are one system. We can't dichotomize our different areas of wellness because they actually all work in tandem with one another. The assumption trap. This is just ensuring that you regularly assess your self-talk because all through the day, we are letting limiting beliefs guide our direction. And it's important that we test those limiting beliefs. Like an assumption might be, if I see somebody in work getting a promotion and I feel that maybe they didn't deserve that promotion, they got it because they were friends with their manager. Well, I can have the assumption that you have to be friends around here with your manager, and that's how you get the promotion. That might disable my hard work. That might impact my overall work ethic, where I now believe I have this assumption that unless I'm pals with my manager, I'm not going to get a promotion. Now, in some cases, there might be a small degree of that, but you can be guaranteed you have a better chance getting that promotion if you are driven by hard work will get me that promotion rather than you only get promotions around here if you're friends with your direct reports. So that's the assumption trap. And when we speak to the overanalyzing trap, this speaks to analysis by or paralysis by analysis. So sometimes it's important just to act. We can look at all the best 5 kilometer run routes around the city, or we can just decide, you know what, I'm going to go out, I'm going to run 2.5K up the canal, and I'm going to run 2.5K back the canal. Sometimes we have to make sure we don't fall into that over-analyzing trap. It's important to have a roadmap, but remember, it's also very important to get started. So just be conscious that you don't fall into any of those 5 traps that we've mentioned when it comes to taking action and setting your goals for the future. So let's now get into those 3 types of goals. And before we do, let's first of all talk about how we normally would set goals. We normally set performance-based goals. So I want to run 5 kilometers, or I want to lose X amount of weight in January. And they're very important. As we've mentioned, there are milestones and our landmarks. But they can actually demotivate us if we're not flexible with them and life gets in the way, which it naturally does, and if we don't have outcome or process goals. So the reason an outcome goal is important is, again, this considers the different values, the different dimensions, and where achieving this goal might impact us in the other areas of our life. So an outcome goal might look like, I want to become a runner. That mission statement may impact many other areas of your life positively. And then if we think about the performance-based goal, the performance-based goal is a crucial part of the process, but we need to accompany it with outcome and process goals. Because if my outcome goal is I want to become a runner, but I miss out on my 5K run target, well, if my ultimate goal is to become a runner, I can be flexible with that target. I can move it to the next month. Now, in an ideal scenario, I will achieve all the performance goals that I set, but we don't live in an ideal scenario. And in truth, when it comes to achieving our goals, it's not a straightforward upward trajectory. Goals, actually, we go up, we come down, we go back up, and that's all part of the learning process. So we need to, when we set our performance goals, understand that it is going to add accountability for us, but also we need to be flexible and we need to have that self-compassion when it comes to our performance goals. The fact we've set them in the first place is half the battle already. And then the process piece, when it comes to our process goals, what are we speaking to here? Well, our process goals give us direction as we move through the week. They allow us to break down effectively what looks like the mountain into the molehill. We're able to say, okay, this week, this is my plan. And I reassess that plan as I continue to move throughout my weeks. So I might start with 3 runs per week. And then after 6 to 8 weeks, when I've built up my fitness level, I might increase the amount of time I'm running each week. And this obviously applies to many other aspects of our life. And if we put it all together, you can see here the ultimate outcome might be that you want to perform well in your job, you want to save enough money to get your mortgage for your house. Well, then a performance variable is that you're going to have to upskill. So you're going to begin to read 1 book a month on the actual subject, which is your subject in terms of your career progression. And you just break that down to a daily process of 10 pages. And all of a sudden, you're hitting that performance goal of 1 book a month. The ultimate outcome is you're in line potentially as you've upskilled for that promotion. And the ultimate outcome is you will get the mortgage for the house, and then everything that goes with that, the other dimensions come into play then. So you can see how it's very easy to apply this process, but it's very important to do it. As we saw at the start, many people say they're clear on their goals, but they don't actually write them down. Now, I would actually recommend that you do this process maybe at least once a month. You check back in once a month in the different dimensions. What is your ultimate outcome? Has it changed? We know due to COVID that it has changed for many of us. Have you been flexible with some of those performance goals you would plan to achieve this year? Or are you finding that there's a feedback loop of negative content now? Your internal dialogue is berating yourself for not being able to achieve some of those goals when many of the factors were actually out of your control. And that is only going to make it harder. If we think about this for a moment, we talk about having our idea of success, having our day-to-day practice. And this really speaks to the process part of goal setting. So as we enter into each day, we have in our mind what an idea of success looks like in an area, whether it's with our nutrition, whether it's with our sleep, whether it's even with our work, how much we want to get done in a day. The other side of this is that sometimes we can be unrealistic with the expectation of what we can get done in a day. We can also sometimes be unrealistic with the goals we set across a week. So we might say, I'm going to do 6 one-hour sessions this week, and I haven't looked at all the meetings that I have in my diary for work. So we've got to be realistic when we're planning this out, because if we want to get our day-to-day practice ultimately closer to our idea of success, we have to ensure we have a positive internal dialogue. If we start shaming, blaming, and judging why our day-to-day practice is far away from our idea of success, well, that gap only starts to get bigger. And if we look at it here, how do I actually close the gap between my idea of success and my day-to-day practice? Well, we mentioned it. You've got to be realistic on what success looks like. You can't blame or shame the gap because it's only going to make it bigger. You have to explore the story you're telling yourself about why the gap exists. So for example, if I am aiming to get 5 30-minute sessions in a week, but I only ever get 2, and I'm feeling quite negative and I'm berating myself in terms of why I haven't got the 5, well, the story I might tell myself is that I've no discipline, or maybe I've no time to get this in. Now that's different. If I've no time, I have to reset and be more realistic with the goal. But if I'm telling myself the story that I'm not disciplined, well, if I'm constantly feeding that internal conversation, well, guess what? That gap is just going to get bigger. So we need to really commit to exploring an empowering story. So what is the evidence that tells you you're not disciplined? Or what is the evidence that tells you that you have got good discipline in other areas of your life? And it's about trying to draw out that empowering, positive story and conversation, because then that allows you to act and actually begin to close that gap. Now, we obviously have gone into greater detail in other webinars about this subject, but just very quickly, if you are trying to create an alternative empowering story, try and view it through the three lenses that you see here. Your reverse lens, which is effectively maybe looking at somebody else in a similar situation. How have they achieved some of the things that you're currently trying to achieve? Can you role model off an individual like that? What about the long lens? We mentioned about sometimes it's just about getting started. The long lens is about looking 3 months, 6 months down the line and saying, actually, what will be the benefit if I start this today, rather than continuing to let it sit in my mind as just a thought. Why don't I just act on it today? Let's not fall into that over-analyzing trap. And then the wide lens is about seeing that, yes, failure might be a part of this process, but what will I learn just by starting the process, by failing, by learning, by growing, and as I keep moving forward? And then when we start to reframe it in our mind, it's a lot easier for us to then take the first step. When we take that first step, remember, the building block of habit is about trigger, behavior, reward. The prime example would be, I feel tired, I have a coffee, I feel alert. But as we move through our day, you have to ask yourself, am I ignoring the real triggers? If I'm tired, is coffee always the answer? Or is there a deeper need there for more rest, more relaxation, so that I'm not gravitating towards coffee and my energy is coming from a more renewable source? Remember, those behavioral responses, they become habits. So tired, I reach for the coffee. If I do that enough times, well, all of a sudden, I become addicted to coffee. We've got to be able to ask ourselves, are these behavioral responses helping me? And is there another alternative? Is there another way of actually fulfilling this need for energy that I have? And then ask yourself, ultimately, am I focused on the meaningful reward in my day-to-day process? So if I go for the coffee to get the boost, well, ultimately, that boost may last an hour to 2 hours, and then I'm back on the coffee again. What's more meaningful to me? Is it having to rely on this substance to keep giving me a pick-me-up? Or is the more meaningful reward if I actually structure proper relaxation and recovery, that I will have more energy? I'll be more engaged with those around me. I won't be relying on this substance to pick me up all the time. Yes, I can use it every now and again, but I can't feel that I'm reliant on this, because then all of a sudden that becomes part of my identity, where I need that coffee to perform. And I can guarantee you that that is not the case. 1 to 2 coffees, fine. But if you're 5, 6, 7, we need more rest. We need to actually prioritize that self-care piece for us. And really, guys, just to put all of that together, I would say the biggest steps in terms of writing out your roadmap is start doing it. Give yourself the time. It'll be worth it. Consider your outcome, your initial aspirations in each of those areas and how they all are interdependent. Think about performance goals that you can be flexible with over time, and then break it down into the process. Think about what are some of your behaviors that are currently going against your goals, and what behaviors could you actually implement that will help you get closer to that performance and ultimately that aspirational outcome goal. And thank you all for joining me today.